Hey guys, it's Johan. This tutorial is going to cover jQuery in a little bit more detail. It's going to show you how to use the Twitter API in an authenticated way to get recent search terms. So it assumes that you've watched the tutorial I have up here, which Troy just posted, which explains the basics of jQuery, how to include it. So I'm not going to cover all that again. It also assumes you know how to use FTP. I'm going to put the source code on the GitHub site, so it'll be in tutorial 4. You can open that up to follow along. And we're going to use the Twitter search API, so you can see some of the documentation here. We're going to use this search endpoint, which looks like this: get search twitter.com, and then you pass in any search terms and you get any recent tweets that correspond to those search terms. Okay, so jumping right in, here's a test page I made so far. It's pretty simple. There's nothing really here. There's a link that doesn't go anywhere, and it says doc ready, meaning our jQuery is loaded. So the source code for it looks like this so far. We're logging that the document is ready in our main loop that gets triggered when the HTML document has been loaded. There's a skeleton of a search function that doesn't do anything. It takes a search term and writes it to the console. And then there's a list here of tweets. This is an ordered list because they're numerically indexed, so you can see that here, the number 1 and 2. And they just have 2 list items that are fake tweets, so the goal is to replace those with actual live data. And then, of course, there's a link to get tweets. You'll notice that it just has a # as an href, meaning it doesn't go anywhere, it stays within the page. And the ID is submit. And you can see earlier when I clicked on it, it sort of puts this # up here. Okay, so the first step would be inside of our document ready loop, when we have our jQuery object, to make something happen when somebody clicks on that link. So to do that, we use the # to refer to jQuery itself, and then we give it an ID of an element. Remember that IDs always have to start with a #, so we use #submit. We use the click function. We pass that a function. And inside of that function, the function doesn't have any parameters. It's anonymous, similar to this one. And this is going to now dictate what happens when somebody clicks on the submit button. Obviously, we can write out to the console, but for testing. But first, we're going to make just a little array. So var is the shorthand for variable. So we're going to set up a variable called search term. This is going to be an array, and it's just going to have a key that we're going to call Q. And this is going to be what we're searching Twitter for. So let's do, let's do architecture or something. Or let's do Bowery. Okay, and then for testing, let's log that out to the console. Okay, so I'm going to upload that, and I'm going to run this. Now, you see the list has disappeared since I removed those items. I'm clicking here. Now you can see there's an object here in the console. Oops, let me go to this side. Okay, and if we open that, right, we just see our search term. So everything's working so far. So the next step would be to then wire this into our search function that we started to write down here. So to do that, all we really do is call that function and pass in the parameter that we've created here. I'm going to actually remove this also. Okay, so now, I'm not going to save this and rerun it, because what's going to happen is it's going to pass this array into here, and it's going to log that back to the console. So now we need to do the actual code down here, and this is where we're going to use jQuery. So again, we use the $, which is the jQuery object, and we're going to call the Ajax function. One thing I wanted to point out is that if you're ever wondering about all the stuff you can do with jQuery or how these functions actually work, you can definitely take a look at the documentation. So that it's api.jquery.com, and in it you can see all the kind of things you can do. So, and they're grouped pretty logically, so you can manipulate things in the DOM, which is the HTML document object model. So you can add items, you can move items around, you can deal with effects, you can deal with CSS, and of course Ajax as well. So in Ajax, there's the jQuery Ajax function. This is what we're actually using. You can see some of the parameters it needs, URL, and there's a lot of settings. But don't worry about all this. The stuff I'm writing here is basically just the gist of what you need to know. So first thing is that we do need to pass in a URL. So in this case, we're going to use the Twitter search API endpoint. I'm copying everything up to the question mark here, and afterwards we're going to pass in our parameters. So this is the URL, and then to add more information to the string, we have to use a plus sign. And what we're going to do here is use another jQuery search function called param, which basically deals with any kind of weird spaces or other characters and automatically transforms them to something that's valid and to be passed in a URL. So we're going to pass in search term. Okay, so that's our URL. The next thing we need to specify is the data type. Don't worry about this too much, but we're specifying JSON-P because we're requesting JSON data, as you can see here, and then we're processing it through a function. And the next thing is we need to pass in another function that gets called when data is received. And this is because when you program Ajax related stuff, there's really no guarantee of when your code is receiving something back. So you basically have to tell your code up front what you want to happen when something gets sent back from the Twitter website. So it's a little bit different. You kind of have to think, in a way backwards, I guess. So this is so here we're going to write whatever happens when we get something back. So right now we're just going to write this to the console. Oops. Okay, let's make sure that that's working. Okay, so let's run that. Get tweets. Okay, so that seems like it worked. The first object is that, and this is our data. You can also always look at the network tab. It's a little big now. But you can see that there was a call here made to search on Twitter, and there's a response. This is probably a lot of information. It's better to look at in the console. So here's our response that we just got back from Twitter. You can see it was completed in 0.3 seconds. And then you can see down here inside of results, there's an array of objects. And this is the tweets that we've requested. So 15, I think, is the default that's returned. And you can see here each one has a number of properties. Text is the actual tweet text, so we're interested in that. So we have to look at the results object, and then inside of results, we have to grab the text property of everything inside of this list. So to do that, we can use a loop. In JavaScript, you can also write a for in loop. So this would be something like for item. Item is a variable that I'm just creating here. This could be called anything in data results. So for everything inside of results, we want to inspect that property. So what we want to do actually is write the stuff to this list here. So to do that, we're using jQuery again to grab the ID of that tweets, and then we're going to append something to that list. And what we're going to append is a list item that we're just going to create dynamically here. So we write the HTML tag, and then we add data results, and here's item, right? Since item is just kind of our placeholder for everything inside of that list. And then we want the text property. And then we close the list item. All right, that should work. Let's try that. Oops. Oh, right. Gotta close the parenthesis and then put the semicolon. Okay. And there it is. So you can see we're getting 15 tweets. Because we're using the append method here, we can basically keep calling this. We're going to keep appending tweets that pertain to the Bowery to this list. So I hope that makes sense. It's pretty straightforward. We just kind of have to think about it backwards. Basically, you have a button, somebody clicks, or you have a link, somebody clicks on the link, the search term gets created, that gets passed to a function, the function gets called, an Ajax request is made. When data is received, it just gets appended to the list of tweets.